Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Steve.
Welcome to the Archaeological Society of Delaware Kent County Chapter meeting for the month of August. We'd like to just go through a few things, introductory comments, and tell you a little bit about the society and tell you or give you a bit of update on what we've been doing recently. First of all, though, I'd like to just give a round of applause, quiet applause, because it's a library, to the library, for having us here. So a little bit about what we're like. I think everyone here is familiar with this, pretty much, and it's about what we are trying to do, what our purpose is, what our mission is as a archaeology society in Delaware. Here is a place where we have been working in Kent County. Just like to ask for a couple of others to give us an update. Craig and possibly Dawn, if you'd like. If you have anything to share, I have a couple of new pictures. Craig, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, we've done some artifact washing, now we're cataloging the artifacts from the project. So that's where we are at the moment. Cataloging. So it's blank at the moment. And maybe some mapping too.
Right here is where a couple of these artifacts were being pulled out of the side of the unit. I wonder, Dawn, if you'd like to add anything to what happened here this day? We went on a trip to the Penn Museum. Joked around, had a little bit of fun. Craig asked for this. He had me stick my head in that hole in the Sphinx first, and then, of course, it was his turn. I only have the picture of him, not the one of me. So that's why he's
I don't
up
want
there.
his if you want it. We can put it on the
I
Facebook
think it
page.
did already circulate in the email.
Yeah. Jill, I'll have Jill put it on the Facebook page, don't worry. We'll make sure you're not forgotten.
Ink shirts.
Ink shirts too.
I selected these other pictures that I took because they represent the range of cultures and just incredible artifacts that happen to be in that museum. From Ur of the Chaldees or Babylonia there on my right-hand side, and then there's, I think it's a dog from ancient China, and of course the Egyptian Sphinx.
Yeah.
We'd just like to, maybe before the Ur exhibit in Iraq is over in either December or January and replaced with another one, I'd like to have your feedback about maybe going again.
I have a counteroffer. I don't know if you've heard about this, but the National Geographic down in Washington, D.C. has a wonderful exhibit about ancient Greece. They say it's the best that's ever left the country. It's there till October 10th. So that's another option to see some really interesting ancient Greek works of art that you've never seen before, unless you've been in Greece. So that's a counteroffer.
It's a good idea. Okay. Well, here's what we've done so far in these chapter meetings on the last Tuesday night of each month. What we've done so far in 2016, and I have to say I look back to each of these, and those were good nights, good lectures, good times. And coming up, including tonight, are 3 more. Yes, I'm just rushing through this. We're going to skip November and December of this year, vacation, and next year in January pick up again. Every month, 10 months, or if you have some feedback, if you have some ideas, if you would like to suggest doing it 12 months of the year, or doing it in November or December and skipping the months in the summer, let me know. Let me know what you think. Okay? Tonight, there's our subject. And Kim Burdick is our special speaker. And I'm going to let Mrs. Burdick come on up, take the microphone, and share with us her expertise about this gentleman who she's about to name for us. Okay? Turn this on for you.
Does it work? Can you hear
Yes.
it? Yes? No?
Good. You can push this or advance, or you can use this button here, your choice.
So, Craig, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Obviously, I didn't give it the name that was on the flyer. He did, so. But in a way, Lafayette saved America. He picked that title because a couple of years ago, when Larry and the reproduction of Lafayette ship came, I wrote an article for Journal of American Revolution, and it was kind of about how Lafayette went back to France and begged the king for men and money and ships, and that's how he saved us. But Lafayette is actually a pretty interesting guy. I have a song on this that I'm afraid to play because it won't stop. It goes into other things, but if you want to see it, I'll sing it. This is kind of what Americans often think about Lafayette, some cardboard figure of a boy, right? These boys are actually students at Lafayette College up in Easton, Pennsylvania. Lafayette College has one of the finest and largest collections of primary documents related to Lafayette. The other very good holding is at Cornell up in Ithaca. Every year at Lafayette College, they celebrate Lafayette's birthday. And I've been lucky enough to go up there. This year, on September 6th, they're actually doing a play that's based on letters between Lafayette and his wife, who's that other cardboard figure those kids are hauling around. But you can see Lafayette had this large name, Marie-Joseph Paul Hughes, Roche Gilbert de Moitié, the Marquis de Lafayette. He actually joked about his name. Lafayette himself said, "It's not my fault. I was named for every saint who could protect me in battle," which was true. And he only called himself Lafayette. This is what he really looked like. He was a nice-looking fellow, an intelligent guy. One of the things that has struck me in all these years of studying Lafayette is that what people think of him is almost more reflective of what generation is talking about him. In the Revolution, people really liked him. Today, we always kind of hear people blowing him off. Oh, he was that boy who got along so well in Washington. And they're kind of reading things into it that aren't there. Lafayette actually was a very good soldier. He was a really smart guy, and he was passionate about what he was doing. He cared. And there's a reason Lafayette and Washington got along so well, and that's because they had similar backgrounds. Both of them had lost their father when they were little kids. Lafayette's own father was killed in the Battle of Metz in the French and Indian War, they call it a different war, but he was killed and never actually met Lafayette. He died before Lafayette was even 2 years old. Washington's own father died when he was little. And Lafayette, when he came to America, is almost the same age as George Washington was during the French and Indian War. When you see all these exciting pictures of Washington rafting on white water with Christopher Gist and going out past Pittsburgh doing these things. They had similar life experiences, and they really did get along very well. This is where Lafayette was born. This guy's not too poor, right? This is in Auvergne, about 400 miles southeast of Paris. It's called the Chateau de Chavignac. And today it's open to the public and have a large collection there. You can go there. But that's where he spent his early years. in those days, aristocrats had arranged marriages. So when his father died when he was little, his mother moved back to Paris with her own family. And Lafayette was at the Chateau Chavignac with his Lafayette grandparents until he was 11. These are his parents. Part of the father's family, they're the feudal nobility of the sword. They were appropriately, by ancestry, by hereditary, they were fighters. That's what they did. It's like if, in those days, if your father was a blacksmith, you would be a blacksmith. If your mother was a nun, that would be too bad. if your mother was in the court, you would be in the court. Things are a little different now, but arranged marriages were a really major part of the life back then. It's said that when Lafayette's father first was introduced to his fiancée, he said, well, she's not too good looking. She's not bad looking, but she's not beautiful. And that's what she became. So when he's 11 years old, Lafayette is sent to Paris to live with his mother at court and with her own grandfather. He attends the Collège de Plessis and he goes to Versailles Academy. And when he's 13, he's already in military training. He's in the Musketeers. So it's kind of like, if you think of Delaware kids at the Delaware Military Academy, whatever those kind of kids do, it's similar. They're being trained in a military mode from a very young age. What happens to him then is that he's orphaned. His mother and his father had already died. His mother dies and then his grandfather dies. So he is kind of the ward of his great-grandfather. So he's a little kid and he's all by himself basically. He's got a lot of staff. He's got a lot of helpers. There's a tutor that he had back home at Chavignac that he still has in Paris. So he becomes the richest orphan in France. And he also has a mind of his own. So he's an interesting little guy. When he's 16, he also is, he's part of an arranged marriage. He doesn't have any choice. He's only 16 and he's married to a 14-year-old. And that is Adrienne de Noailles. And the Noailles still today are some of the most elegant and wealthy families in France. So these are arranged marriages, they're not marriages for love. As it turns out, and you'll see at the end of this presentation, Adrienne and Lafayette do form a very strong bond. And as older people, their love is actually pretty impressive. Now, he's part of the Noailles regiment. That's one of the things he gets involved in because of his marriage to Adrienne. He's in doing military training in Metz, and he's invited by the Comte de Broglie, this guy, commander of the army, who's basically his boss, to come to a dinner party. And the guest of honor is the Duke of Gloucester, who's that kind of sappy-looking guy at the end. But the Duke of Gloucester was the King of England's brother, and he's a guest of honor. And it's said that the Duke of Gloucester was actually kind of making fun of his brother, the King of England. He was sort of annoyed at his brother anyways. And he was talking with enthusiasm about the Americans and their plans and their rebellion. And depending on what historian you read, the Duke of Gloucester was either scoffing at the Americans or lauding them. It depends on whose perception it is. But in any case, Lafayette got really excited. And he's still pretty young, right? He's 15, 16. And he says, from that hour, I could think of nothing but this enterprise, and I resolved to go to Paris at once to make further inquiries. Remember, this is the richest kid in France. He can do whatever he wants, because there really aren't any grown-ups that can tell him what to do. And so he goes to Paris. And there he meets Baron de Kalb, and you know de Kalb Pike and all these places named, that's de Kalb. And Silas Deane. Silas Deane was from Connecticut. Both of them were there, and also at the same time as Ben Franklin. They're in Paris, and they're trying to get France involved in the American Revolution. Their thinking is France already hates Britain, and it's a long traditional dislike from France and Britain, but France had just overcome Britain in the French and Indian Wars. And so Ben Franklin's really pushing. Baron de Kalb is very much interested in this rich kid, right? And this kid is passionate. He loves the whole idea of the spirit of independence. He loves the idea of representative government. So he is introduced by de Kalb to Silas Deane, who is representing the Continental Congress. And they say, sure, kid, you can come. You can be a general in Philadelphia, no problem, right? Except Silas Deane was having his own political problems. And so when Lafayette signs all of these papers and things are not going quite as smoothly as this idealistic kid would wish. But he has money, he can do what he wants. So what he did was to contract with a shipbuilder, and he had his own ship built. And he stocked it, and he loaded it up, and he got 15 of his buddies and Baron de Kalb to say, yeah, we'll go to America, maybe, why not? Sounds cool to us. And so they did. But Louis XVI, who actually is only a couple years older than Lafayette, when you think about, we always call him a boy, right? Well, the King of France was only about 3 years older than Lafayette. The one that we always love in this country, Joseph Martin, he's about 3 years younger than Lafayette. These soldiers are not grown-ups. They're not our age, right? And I didn't really think about this until my own son. Some of you must have met him, but he just graduated from Air National Guard down at Lafayette Air Force Base. I was watching all these little kids marching around in their dang uniforms, you know. Well, we're Air National Guard, is dang. And I was thinking to myself, dang, these are really little kids, you know, they're like nice, smooth, round, rosy faces, and now they all are marching, and they're so proud of themselves. I never really thought about how young soldiers really are. So Lafayette, we always think of as really young. He was pretty much the median age. He was actually older than some of those kids at Lackland Air Force Base. Right? So the King of France was only a few years older. More than that, the King of France was related to Adrienne. He's one of his relatives by marriage. The King of France says, no, you cannot go. This is wrong. What if Britain comes against us? British ambassador is already complaining, and I don't think you should do this. British ambassador is demanding that the king seize Lafayette's ship and not let him go. Lafayette always does what he thinks is the right thing to do. He does what he wants to do. He went to Spain, and he took all his buddies, including Baron de Kalb, with him, and they sailed to America from Spain. So be glad he wasn't your kid, right? They got there in June of 1777. And this is from 1952. It's a first day cover, but in South Carolina they were celebrating the 175th anniversary of Lafayette's arrival in America. So let's get back a bit. So they came in this big ship, and then they decide to commission a carriage, a coach, to bring them from South Carolina to Philadelphia. They're used to Parisian roads. They're used to nice, smooth alleys. What they found were really rugged, ruddy, bumpy dirt roads that wrecked their carriage. And so for part of it, these young French noblemen and Baron de Kalb, they're hiking. And part of it, they're taking boats. If they could find a boat, they would. And so they end up in Annapolis, sailing from Annapolis into Philadelphia. So just getting to America by running away to Spain, taking a ship over, then commissioning a carriage that falls apart, and hiking, and then taking a boat to Philadelphia. That's a pretty big adventure right there. When Washington gets there, and he has someplace depending on what you read, 11 or 15 other kids plus Barrett. He presents himself to the Continental Congress, who tells him basically, yeah, right, go home, kid. Well, this was not to do, right? So some of the other boys did go back to France. Lafayette said no, he had come, and he knew he would be in a whole bunch of trouble if he went back home. Right? The king told him not to go. So Lafayette said he would serve for free. He had everything they needed. He had money. He had supplies. He was happy to pay for his own stuff. He just wanted to fight. So you can see from this engraving the kind of concerned looks of these people in Philadelphia. They all thought, I don't think so. And so Washington was told in no uncertain terms, you better babysit that boy very carefully. Right? This kid he's rich, he's got everything you need, including connections, but he's also in a whole bunch of trouble at home. Be very, very careful of this kid. So the next day, August 6th, Lafayette and Washington go out along the Delaware River. And these people, you might even know, this is part of a ship votive frieze that's now in the Philadelphia Maritime Museum. But they're on this old map, these X's are the chevaux de frise. They were spikes about the size of a telephone pole with metal points on them, and they were made like a snake fence sticking up out of the water. So if these wooden-hulled British ships would come up the river, they would get jabbed and they would be wrecked. So if you know the story about the British coming to Lewis, they are warned by Captain Andrew Snape Hammond, don't go up there because they got these chevaux de frise in the water. So the British came up into Lewis, and then they turned around and they went almost to Virginia, came back up the Chesapeake, because these spiky things were dangerous. Some of them are still in the water. So the next step, they went to the Mullen House. And if you're from Pennsylvania, you probably know this place, John. Years ago, I actually, when I was Denny's age, I helped them to raise money to save this house. This house had been abandoned, and there was all kinds of graffiti and stuff on the walls. Now it's very well cared for. It's a real point of pride up in Bucks County. But this was Washington's headquarters up along the Wissahickon in Bucks County. And Colonel Pickering wrote, there's been an addition to the General's family lately, the Marquis de Lafayette, one of the first families of France. Young gentleman of modest manners, possessed of an immense fortune, a country at peace, and a wife. So he's there. He's at the Mullen House. And now people they're not sure about this kid, right? They're not sure about any of these foreign soldiers. Most of the foreigners that Ben Franklin and Silas Deane had encouraged to come here, they were older, they were more experienced. But here was this one who said he would do it for free, and what the heck. So he endeared himself right away to the Americans. He said he hadn't come to teach, he came here to learn. So he had a gracious, kind of diplomatic manner, even though he was only 19 years old. So they get word that these ships that had left Lewis and had gone down to the bottom of the Chesapeake and were coming up, were landing at Elkton. And so Washington gathers up this American encampment, and they start marching toward Wilmington. They're marching through Philadelphia, they're marching, stationing themselves at Wilmington for its meeting. And the British are unloading at Elkton, coming across to Glasgow, where they stayed at Aiken's Tavern. So this is a lot of people for Delaware. I don't know what the total population of Newcastle County was in 1777, but it was pretty small, right? Here's 11,000 Americans and 16,000 British, and you're in the middle, in the Pincher movement. And Lafayette is part of this group that's marching down from Michigan Creek. One of the stories that you'll hear a lot about, this is a house that's Grays Hill, which is over near Elkton. Looks pretty nice now. They Washington went to scope out the view. They went over toward Iron Hill, which is just within walking distance of UB. And then they spent the night at Grace Hill at this Robert Alexander's house. It turns out Robert Alexander was actually a toy, but it was okay. He was nice enough to Washington and Lafayette, and Green and whoever else was with him. But it was raining, and the weather was so terrible they thought they'd better spend the night, and this fellow took them in. So this house is part of Delaware folklore. Here are a number of places. This is where you can go dig and find stuff about Lafayette, right? But when they're coming down from the Chamonix, they're marching through Philadelphia, through Chester, through Marcusville. Spot number 1 up here is the Robinson House. They had an encampment there at the Robinson House. Then they'd be marching down Penny Hill into Wilmington, Quaker Hill, White Clay Creek, Hill Burns, Christiana, and Newcastle. These are all places that from 1777 is the Philadelphia campaign, 1781 is the Yorktown campaign. Both of those time periods, Delaware is visited and occupied by these soldiers. Hilburn's house. On September 6, 1777, 3 days after the Battle of Cooch's Bridge. Oh, Lafayette was not at Cooch's Bridge, no matter what Bill Conley tells you, no. But he was allowed to come to a council of war being held at the Hilburn's house. And on that day, he turned 20. So that's why annually we have a big covered dish dinner at Hilburn's house and have an author or a speaker. This year it's on the 10th, and the flyers on the tree. But Lafayette turned 20 at the Hilburn's house, which is Delaware Park would have been the front acreage of this property, and directly behind it is the White Clay Creek. It's almost within walking distance of Stanton Campus Delta. So this is a Quaker's house. This is an interesting piece of Revolutionary War history. It's not all rah-rah 4th of July kind of stuff. This is a known Quaker pacifist who gets a knock on his door at the crack of dawn saying, "We are having a council of war at your house tonight at 5, sir." And what do you do? Yes, sir. So there's a lot of interesting pieces of Delaware history related not just to Lafayette, but to the Quakers, the Anglicans, and the Presbyterians, and the very different attitudes toward this war. From the Hilburn's house, the Americans and the British both march up to Chet's Ford. That's the house that was Lafayette's headquarters. And this is the first time in America that Lafayette is involved in a fight. Basically, remember, George Washington is supposed to be babysitting this kid. He's not supposed to let him do everything. The kid is a trained soldier, and he's really chomping at the bit. At Battle of Brandywine, Washington is really, really busy. And so Lafayette says, "I think I'll go hang out with Sullivan for a while." And George says, "Okay, right." So what this thing with those little triangles on it, that's actually a map that Lafayette drew. It's his own little map of where everybody was positioned on the Battle of the Brandywine. And he is really dismayed. He sees that the Americans are starting to retreat. He's there on a horse, and he starts rounding them up, telling them to fight like men and not retreat. So he gets shot in the leg. And the legend is, a really cool Delaware legend, is that a camp follower named Belle McCluskey removes a bullet from Lafayette's leg. And she saved it her whole life, so that later, many years later, when Lafayette is the age I am now, he came back to Delaware, and this old lady asked Major Duquette, "Please, will you introduce me to Lafayette? I still have the bullet I removed from his leg when we were kids at the Battle of the Brandywine." So he becomes very highly respected after that, because he'd shown his merit. He was really good. He helped to round up the men and to participate in an orderly retreat. So the British did win the Battle of Brandywine, but Lafayette, through his own enthusiasm, through his own passion for doing the right thing, he becomes automatically somebody that the other soldiers who fought with him began to respect. Now the next thing, he's got this bullet in his leg. He's gone out to Bethlehem with a number of other wounded Americans to the hospital. But by November, this kid is really itchy. He wants to be part of this war. He is put in charge of about 300 men, and they have a run-in with some Jaegers. Lafayette very carefully had gone out and scouted out where these Germans were. He knew, and he had really psyched it out and thought about it very carefully. So Nathaniel Greene, who's really in charge of that operation, wrote to George Washington the next day, "We have a fine body of troops and fine spirits, and everyone wishes to come to action. The Marquis, with about 400 militia and the Rifle Corps, attacked the enemy's picket last evening, killed about 20, wounded many more, and took about 20 prisoners. The Marquis is charmed with the spirited behavior of the militia and Rifle Corps. They drove the enemy about half a mile and kept this ground until dark. The enemy's picket consisted of about 300 and were reinforced during the skirmish. The Marquis is determined to be in the way of danger." So much for babysitting that kid. And in fact, one of the really fun things you can do is to go in the digital versions of George Washington's papers. They've been transcribed by the University of Virginia, and they're really interesting. So you can find on November 26th this letter that Nathaniel Greene wrote to Washington. You can also find a huge 2-page letter that this very enthusiastic kid wrote to George Washington, and he said, "And I wish I could have been more help to Greene. He has to come slowly because he has to be with his men. But I, on the other hand, I'm just a volunteer." So you begin to see through the letters his spirit and his enthusiasm, and truly how fun it was. You can see why George Washington and the older men got a kick out of him. So, winter of Valley Forge, Lafayette is there. This is on the right. That's a document these soldiers had to sign. It's really kind of a pledge of allegiance to the United States. There are a bunch of these, but this one is Lafayette's, signed by George Washington. And it acknowledges that the United States of America is real and that these people are going to serve it to the best of their ability. So it's pretty neat that this thing signed by Lafayette and Washington still exists. In the spring, you know Tom Welch, I'm sure you know Tom Welch, who portrays Alan McLean. When we had Tom Welch come to the Hale Burns house once to talk about Alan McLean, and I was absolutely mind-boggled, because I was thinking, why is he telling my stories? Because I actually, when I was Lafayette's age, I lived near Berry Hill, up by Plymouth Meeting Mall. And the story of Lafayette at Berrien Hill was part of the local folklore up there. And Tom was busy talking about this up here in Stanton, Delaware. Oh, that's really weird. And he was talking about the Oneida Indians and all this stuff. And I remember when I was 20, when I was Lafayette's age, thinking, that's baloney. The Oneidas are where I really grew up in upstate New York, right? But guess what? There were 50 Oneida Indians at Valley Forge, and they came to Berrien Hill. Tom Welch is right. Alan McLean was at Berrien Hill, and so was Lafayette. The Berrien Hill is part of White Marsh Township, and it's one of their most favorite stories up there. Lafayette was in charge of the scouting expedition. The British were leaving Philadelphia, which they had occupied that whole winter of Valley Forge. So Washington sent Lafayette and some other scouts, including the 50 Oneidas, up to White Marsh Township to see what you could see from the hill looking down into the valley. And he found out that the British were coming to attack him. And Tom says it's because Al McLean took them off. But Lafayette had his act together. He figured out there was a road that the British didn't know about that led to Conshohocken. And so Lafayette escapes from Berrien Hill and from British control with his Indians and with his other militia guys. And they zip down the road to Conshohocken. And evade the British. So up there, the White Marsh Township, up just past Plymouth Meeting Mall, that's a really important story. That's part of Delaware's story too. Thanks, Nicole. Now in June, the Battle of Monmouth. Some of you know Gary Stone, who was an archaeologist from Monmouth. Gary's actually coming to speak in Hilburn's house in November. And what his book is Fatal Sunday, about the Battle of Monmouth. Basically, it's one day, it's very hot. The key notes of Battle of Monmouth include the story of Molly Pitcher. But Charles Lee, that obnoxious patriot with his little doggies, he was asked by George Washington, would he lead the troops at Monmouth? And Charles Lee thought it was too trivial and he didn't want to be bothered with it. And so Washington asked Lafayette. By this time, Lafayette, even though he's only 20 years old, he's proved himself, he's sensible, he knows what he's doing, he's able to get people to do what he wants. So Washington then asked Lafayette, who said, sure. And then Charles Lee said, wait a minute, no, it's mine. And Lee proceeds to take over and to do a lot of really dumb stuff. And so the end of the Battle of Monmouth isn't really that much about Lafayette, except that this little snippet of Charles Lee. But Charles Lee is then arrested by Washington, gets in a lot of trouble, and he's court-martialed. So the Battle of Monmouth, from the point of the story of Lafayette, is a sideline, but from an interesting time of enormous heat, when more guys died from heat exhaustion and stroke than they did from bullets. It's an interesting story. From there, they go to Rhode Island. Rhode Island is the first, supposed to be the first engagement where French ships will be involved. John Sullivan is in charge of this event, which is in September. So see how much they're moving around. Can you imagine you're walking, you're not riding in your car, you're not flying. You're going from Brandywine to all over the place, but then they end up Valley Forge. From Valley Forge, they're going to New Jersey, to Monmouth, and then a few days later, they start walking to Rhode Island. These guys are walking with all these heavy backpacks and their oxen and their cows and things. They're everywhere. They're not resting. Lafayette's not having an easy life. He's doing what all the other soldiers do. When he gets to Rhode Island, which is the siege of Newport, the de Tierney's ships have been very badly damaged, as have the British ships, in a terrible storm off the coast of Newport. De Tierney wants to take his ships to Boston and get them fixed. And so he takes off. Sullivan sends Lafayette to Boston. Lafayette is riding a series of horses. It's a pretty long ride today if you're driving your car to go from Boston to Newport. Lafayette is swapping horses, go as fast as you can. It takes them only about 7 hours by horseback to get to Boston. He's dealing with de Tierney because he speaks French. He's also of the nobility, so he's worthy to speak to de Tierney. He's talking to the guys. It's really important that you get these ships fixed. The ship repairs people are saying, okay. And then he's racing back there. So he's making this round trip in a very short amount of time. And so he's an important player just because he did it efficiently, he did it quickly, and he could speak to de Tierney. Most of the other people couldn't. And Sullivan is really pleased with what he does. When Lafayette gets back, he's exhausted, he's hot, he's sweating, he's already dead to Boston and back on these horses. He asked Sullivan, can he be part of the rear guard? So he is rounding up the soldiers. The Americans are ready to leave. Lafayette is trying to get them in an orderly retreat. And so Sullivan writes to President Lawrence in Philadelphia, the Continental Congress, who writes back, please inform the Marquis de Lafayette that Congress have a due sense of his sacrifice and his gallantry in going on Rhode Island, for the greatest part of the army had retreated, and his good conduct in bringing off the pickets and out-sentries deserves their particular approbation. So people are impressed with this kid. He's still, at this point, he's still 20, almost 21, but he's able to carry out these missions, to do it accurately, to do it well, and to really think things through. Now, 1779 happens to be, throughout the American Revolution, kind of a slow year. There's not much that goes on in 1779. Lafayette gets a letter that said that his little daughter had died, and he really does want to go home. So he gets permission, he goes back home, and his wife tells him, the king is still really mad that you ran away. You did this without permission, and you better go over to the Versailles and apologize, right? So Lafayette goes over there, talks to Louis XVI. Remember, Louis XVI is not even 5 years older than Lafayette. They're close to the same age. So they go over there. Finally, Louis says, okay, whatever. And soon Ben Franklin is riding home to Continental Congress. What an amazing job Lafayette was doing, lobbying to help the American cause in France. Every day he's over there at court. Every day he's asking the noblemen, he's asking the king, whoever will listen. Washington really needs men and ships and army. And by golly, that kid. So by March 5th of 1780, Louis XVI and the men, they've authorized men, ships, and supplies. Louis XVI authorizes him to officially communicate with George Washington and say that this is amazing because these French soldiers, they are they're very well trained. They were very haughty, but they would be auxiliaries and they would be under the command of George Washington, and that's under the direction of the King of France. So what happens? Rochambeau was appointed. Lafayette really wanted to be the commander of the French troops. The French said, no, kid, you're too young, forget it. They send Rochambeau. Rochambeau was about 55 that year. Rochambeau, to French today, if you ask them about Lafayette, they'll, no. Rochambeau, that's the hero. But Rochambeau was the hero. Rochambeau was ready to retire. He was called back to unpack his coach and told he's going to the colonies to fight with George Washington. And so he's one of the most famous generals in France. Lafayette is sent back on Lermillon. That's reproduction that you might have actually seen it. It was in Baltimore and it was in Philly. It came upstream to Newport 2 years ago, I guess. Rochambeau was given the commission that Lafayette wanted, but Lafayette was sent home on Lermillon to bring the news to Boston that Rochambeau was coming with men and money and troops. So Lafayette was really feted as an American hero for accomplishing this extraordinary deed. Now, there used to be, I am sure, back in the days of Russ McKay, a sign like this in Christiana. But I went over there yesterday and I can't find it. But in Christiana, Lafayette was there along the creek and he was taking Washington's own Virginia troops down toward Yorktown. The sign is missing. I don't know what happened to it. But this one is in Virginia. In February, Washington was listening to Virginia's governor, who was complaining about all of the British soldiers who were down there. Washington sent 1,200 men down to join Steuben in Virginia. So Lafayette is there a long time before Rochambeau and the W3R folks got there. And under Lafayette's command, they're beginning to position people to kind of surround the place. So Lafayette is a hero of that spring too. So it ends, of course, as you know, the W3R, the Yorktown campaign. The French are really involved. They marched all 9 states from Newport through Delaware, all the way to Yorktown, Virginia. Lafayette was there to greet them. Right? So it's a really a major part of American history that, thanks to Rochambeau and the French troops, we were able to defeat Cornwallis at Yorktown. So this is a picture of the little ball guy in the back, that's Lafayette. The other one is Tench Tillman with Washington. They were there when Cornwallis surrendered. But the story thickens, right? Here, Lafayette went home in December. He had been very impressed and interested with this slave, his name was James Armistead. James Armistead had acted as a spy for Lafayette. He had gone into British camps and said that he was a slave and found out all kinds of information, brought it back to Lafayette and to Washington. When Lafayette went back to France, he joined a French abolition society and he becomes a major player in the abolitionist scene. And he really pitches this to George Washington. So Washington had a different kind of relationship, but at the end of his life when Washington died, he did free his slaves. He couldn't free Martha's because they belonged to the Custis family, but he freed his own. And James Armistead changed his own last name to Lafayette. He didn't belong to Lafayette. He admired Lafayette, and he named himself James Armistead Lafayette. 1784, Washington invites Lafayette to come over. And they're talking about business deals between France and America. They're talking about abolitionists. They're doing a lot of things. And when he went back to France, it was getting to be a trickier time over there, but he was able to cut some deals. Then the French Revolution broke out. And this kid, by now he's not quite 40, but he's still his own personality. When the French Revolution breaks out, Lafayette is still thinking about fraternity, liberty, equality, all these things. And France is a major, major economic problem, very much caused by the fact that France are giving so much money to America to fight the dollar. It's a really sticky thing because the people who become empowered by the French Revolution were not Louis XVI and the people that had helped us. And so we broke our promise, kind of. We didn't help them back. So it's a tricky thing. Lafayette gets the key to the Bastille. He's there when the Bastille is broken into. And now the key to the Bastille belongs to Mount Vernon. Lafayette actually gave it to George Washington. Lafayette, with assistance from Thomas Jefferson, who happened to be in Paris, wrote the Rights of Man. And it's a different thing than here with a president and all the things we have. But in France, he favored a parliamentary monarchy, but one that had a constitution. He believed people should have the right to vote. People should be able to say the things they want to say. And Louis XVI, his friend and foe and relative, said, I don't get it. So it was an awkward position. Lafayette becomes the head of the National Guard. National Guard, just like your job is to protect people, right? So as a revolutionary kind of, but also in favor of a constitutional monarchy, this kid's in an awkward position. He becomes head of the National Guard, and some of the National Guard want to support what's right, and some of them are really into getting rid of the king. So I think American Revolution compared to French Revolution is pretty calm. French Revolution to me is absolutely horrifying to read. It's a very, very scary thing. In 1789, some women were complaining there was no bread in the markets and everything cost too much. So some young girl with a drum started beating a drum and yelling and screaming, and pretty soon the women joined her, and they began to march on Versailles. And pretty soon the men began to march on Versailles. And pretty soon it said there were about 10,000 people mobbing the palace. And Lafayette is the head of the National Guard. What's he going to do, right? Some of the National Guard are on the mob side. And so it's kind of scary. So he's very bold. He always does what he thinks is the right thing to do. The mob broke into, this actually the Tuileries, they broke in there, they murdered the Queen's guards, and they were trying to get to Marie Antoinette, who was not a popular person in France anyways. And Lafayette manages to save her. And as a symbol to the crowd, and think about mass hysteria, mob violence, all the junk you learn about in Psychology 101, right? How people act in the crowd. Lafayette, in a piece of theatrical drama, he got Marie Antoinette to come out onto the balcony with her kids. And God only knows what could have happened, right? But he's counting on the fact that people were used to saluting the king and the queen, right? So he takes the king and the queen and their kids out there, and he bows and he kisses Marie Antoinette's hand. And like a crazy thing, half of the crowd is yelling, "Vive le roi!" So it was a crazy thing, but it's a kind of very bold and daring thing that he did. So in France, still some people complain about Lafayette and they push Rochambeau. Still some people say he was the hero of the countries, but he was just brave. He was daring. He was a little, yeah. Now, this is real pictures from the time, right? Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were both executed by guillotine. The king first in April, Marie Antoinette in October. At the same time, Lafayette's in-laws were guillotined. Adrienne's mother, her sister, her grandmother, they were taken to the guillotine. It was the Americans in Paris who helped to broker some deals to protect her, even a little bit. She went back to the castle that we looked at in the first slide briefly, but she was in prison. Now, Lafayette had 4 kids, one little girl that died, 2 other little girls, and a boy. This one is named George Washington Lafayette. The Americans helped his mother pack up George Washington Lafayette and send him to America. And it puts our George Washington in an awkward position because he's supposed to show neutrality because of the mob rule in France. But of course George Washington Lafayette is there. He goes to Harvard. He lives partly in Philadelphia at the President's Mansion in Philadelphia. Partly he's raised with Washington's grandchildren in Rockland. So thanks to American negotiation and the great respect that Lafayette and Washington had for each other, this kid was taken out of France and raised in America during the French Revolution. The wife is better off in a prison. Olmut's prison is where Lafayette ends up. It's a prison that's it's kind of in the Alsace-Lorraine area. Lafayette is taken there. After several years, Adrienne, his wife, makes her own way to Olmut's prison with her 2 daughters. And she willingly puts herself in prison with Lafayette because it's safer there than it is for her to be in Paris. So this is to me, it's a scarier thing than the American Revolution, but they were there for a couple of years. 2 little girls, the mother and Lafayette. Finally, when Napoleon comes into play, Napoleon gets the Lafayette family out of Olmutz. Lafayette's not a real passionate fan of Napoleon, but he's glad enough to be out. Life starts to settle down a little bit. When he gets an invitation from America, Washington's already dead by now. Washington died in 1800. And of course the little boy was a grown-up and went home. But in 1824, Lafayette's triumphal return is a really interesting thing to read about it. If you're old enough to remember the Beatles, and all the craziness when the Beatles came to America, that's about the way that Washington's protege, Lafayette, was received. When he came back in his early 60s, comes back to America. He's greeted with some mobs of enthusiastic Americans who remember what he had done. They're impressed by what he had also done in France. And so every place he goes, there are parties, there are balls, there are parades. That brown sign with this picture is actually a parade banner from Philadelphia. The gloves are really funny. They're kid gloves. There were some on display at Hagley a couple of years back. And they were sold all over the place. People have a lot of balls and receptions. And it said the first time that Lafayette encountered these, it was typical to kiss the lady's hand. And he noticed it had his picture on it, and he didn't want to kiss his own picture. So he had kind of an awkward moment there for a bit. And I had told you when he came to Wilmington, Major Duquette, who was a Delaware war hero, wanted to have a reception for him. And Belle McCluskey came. She was the one who met a young girl who had removed the bullet from his leg in the Battle of Britain. Now she's sort of a toothless old bag, but she really wanted to meet Lafayette, and she still had the bullet around her leg. And so, we don't know, but we think Belle McCluskey did get to meet Lafayette again. So, after this year, a number of places all across America are named for Lafayette because of his triumphal victory. And then, 10 years later, he's 76. Then he died. He wanted to be buried in the soil of both countries. And so George Washington Lafayette, his son, had actually honored his wish. And so in Picpus Cemetery in Paris, you can see his grave. And beyond that, these are some of the people who were guillotined in the French Revolution. This is a very dramatic, powerful cemetery. But the son actually did bury him in some soil that he had brought back from Bunker Hill, and during the triumphal return, he had gathered soil from some of his pieces. So he is buried in French American soil. And curiously enough, every year, the American Friends of Lafayette, which is a pretty good-sized group in this country, they go to Picpus Cemetery, and they change the flag every year, put up a fresh American flag, and have a memorial service. So he's an interesting guy. He always did what he thought was right. He was organized. He was well trained as a military man. He was thoughtful, and he was really loyal to his friends. So that's it. But this is a bust by Kuno, and one year when I got to go to the celebration at Lafayette College, Jacques Boissier, who was an old man who actually started W3R, the National Historic Trail for the Yorktown Campaign, presented Lafayette College with this Houdon bus, which was a big hit. But that was amazing to imagine all college kids out on the green, all singing Happy Birthday to Lafayette. It was a better moment. And I don't know what this is. I found this and I thought, we must have this. Was there a film about Lafayette? So that's all. But if you have any questions, as you know, I can talk all night, so ask God. And if you want to look at real primary documents, Cornell and Lafayette College are amazing stuff. So thank you all very much. Do you have any questions?
Any questions anymore?
Kim,
Yeah.
the Lafayette College you're talking about is the one in Easton, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's really special. At that birthday party, they had Louis Barbu was a Lafayette reenactor who was now he's about 50, I guess he was 40. They brought him up in a horse-drawn coach in front of the library, and they had all of the food service on the green at Lafayette College. So all the kids were eating roast beef outside when Lafayette drove up in his coach, and the whole campus was singing Happy Birthday to Lafayette. It was, you know, some things really make you get tears in your eyes. That was cool. Any other questions?
Well, I had a couple of things I'd like to say. One, while you're still standing here, Kim, we all signed a thank you note, thank you certificate. We want you to have an appreciation for your time, and, well, we learned a lot.
Good.
Other thing I wanted to say was on that table over there before you leave, there's a bunch of stuff that's free, okay? And I'm sure there's something else I'm forgetting to mention. Anybody?
Oh, yeah. Y'all come to Lafayette's birthday party, September 10th. Bring a covered dish, it's free.
So next month is the next one of these events. Next month it'll be about Native American tools, projectile points, and so on. It's called the Novaculate question. You have to come and find out what in the world that refers to. Okay?
Who will be giving this all?
What's that?
Who will be giving this all?
That is Kristen Scar. She spoke last February. And so she is an archaeologist with Del Dot. Yeah.
Let me say that if you go to the Wilbur's house for a birthday party, it will be very nice, and there's a lot of people out there, but you mentioned one of them. It was a very nice occasion, and back of the Wilbur's house on the patio. So if you go, you'll be very pleasantly surprised.
You can bring your fishing poles.
Well, I don't know about that. That's never years old not to have a license.
This year, the speakers are, they're two French teachers from Pennsylvania who are reenactors, and they have the most beautiful 18th century French costumes. These tall Marie Antoinette hairdos and these things. When I saw them with their blue jeans, I had no clue who they were. But their topic is a discussion, what about Madame Lafayette? And Adrian was really good. So you'll
Well, everybody, thank you for coming. Have a good night.
Thank you.